You know that feeling. You're at a party and you just want to leave. Or you're making small talk and it feels more draining than running a marathon. Well, have you ever felt kind of guilty about that? It turns out this isn't some kind of social failing. For a certain group of people, the idea that more friends equals more happiness isn't just wrong, it's biologically flipped upside down. Okay, let's dive into this paradox. It's fascinating. Right from the start, we're taught that being social is the key to a happy life. But what if that's just a massive oversimplification? What if, for some brains, frequent social contact isn't a battery charger at all? What if it's actually a huge drain on a very finite power source? This one question really challenges one of the most basic things we assume about being human. So, to kick things off, we're going to look at a pretty startling anomaly that popped up in a major psychological study. It's a finding that just cuts right against everything we're told about being social and happy, and it uncovers this deep, really surprising link between intelligence and the need for other people. Okay, so check this out. A study in the British Journal of Psychology surveyed 15,000 people, and they found something that made them do a double take. For most people, the results were exactly what you'd expect. More socializing meant more happiness. But when they looked at the high IQ group, the whole trend just completely flipped on its head. And this is the absolute kicker. For the highly intelligent, spending more time with friends was linked to lower happiness. And this wasn't some tiny effect either. The researchers found it was linear, which means the higher a person's intelligence, the stronger this negative effect actually becomes. So what on earth is going on here? Well, the answer starts way back in our evolutionary past. To really get this, we have to look at something called the Savanna theory of happiness. The basic idea is that our brains haven't really caught up to the modern world. We're essentially running ancient software on brand new hardware. Our gut reactions, our emotions, they're still being shaped by the survival pressures our ancestors faced out on the African savanna. And this is where that split becomes crystal clear. See, for our hunter-gatherer ancestors, being in a dense, tightly knit group was everything. It meant protection, sharing food, survival. That instinct to seek out the pack is still hardwired into the average brain. But the theory suggests that highly intelligent people have adapted more effectively to our world today. They don't need the tribe to survive anymore, and they're way more driven by these complex, long-term goals. So for this kind of brain, constant social chatter isn't a safety net, it's just a distraction from their real work. But okay, if high intelligence means you don't need the pack as much, why does hanging out with people feel so incredibly exhausting? It's clearly more than just a distraction. It feels like this intensely draining biological event. And that brings us to the triple drain hypothesis, which breaks down the three main reasons why social interaction can be so metabolically expensive. The first drain is something called high baseline cortical arousal. Now, this is neurological, not psychological. What the research shows is that introverted brains are just more sensitive to what's going on around them because their baseline level of activity is already higher. They're already turned up, They're closer to their optimal stimulation level before anyone even says hello. So a party or even just a group chat can easily push them way past that sweet spot and right into cognitive overload and burnout. Drain number 2, threat detection overdrive. Now, this often gets lumped in with high neuroticism, but it's much more helpful to think of it as a high-fidelity monitoring system. For this type of brain, a simple conversation takes up a massive amount of processing power. It's not just about hearing the words. It's about constantly scanning for tiny shifts in tone, micro-expressions, potential social missteps, and that constant high-level monitoring just burns through cognitive energy like crazy. And finally, the third drain. Empathic absorption, or what you might call the sponge effect. See, deep empathy isn't just a feeling, it's a physiological process. You don't just notice that someone's anxious or sad, your nervous system literally runs a simulation of their emotional state. So you leave a get-together completely wiped out because, in a very real way, you just live the emotional lives of several other people for the last 3 hours. Okay, so we've got the psychological theory and the biological reasons for the drain. But can we actually see this happening inside the brain? Well, it turns out we can. Let's shift gears and look at the hard science, where advanced imaging is actually validating this entire experience on a neural level. This brings us to a really cool concept called Interbrain Synchrony, using this technique called Hyperscanning, where they literally scan two brains at the same time while people interact. Neuroscientists found that a real connection is a measurable biological thing. The neural activity in the brains of two people who are connecting literally syncs up, becoming phase-locked.
But achieving this state takes a lot of energy, and it requires a deep sense of psychological safety. And this, right here, is the biological difference between a great conversation and a draining one. When you're with someone you truly connect with, your brain's phase lock, and it just feels effortless, rewarding. But when you're forcing it, what a lot of people call masking, your brains fail to sync up. This creates what you can think of as neural friction. Your brain is burning a massive amount of energy trying to bridge a biological gap that just refuses to close. And that directly explains that profound fatigue you feel after superficial socializing. And to add another layer to all this, there's theory of mind overload. This is handled by a part of the brain called the temporoparietal junction, or TPJ. For a more analytical mind, it's not enough to just hear the words someone is saying. The brain is constantly working overtime to analyze the true intent behind those words, to figure out what someone really means. And this constant deep-level analysis adds yet another huge energy cost to just about every social interaction. So when you start putting all this evidence together, a completely new picture starts to form. Being selective about who you spend time with isn't a character flaw or a sign of arrogance. It's a logical, even necessary strategy for managing a high-fidelity nervous system. It's all about energy management. This all leads to a kind of strategic trade-off. Highly intelligent people are often what you'd call project-oriented. Their life is really structured around achieving these ambitious, long-term goals. And from that point of view, every hour spent on superficial small talk is a direct loss of progress. A calculation is happening, whether it's conscious or not, where time, the most precious resource, is being allocated to things with a much higher perceived return on investment. And this choice is actually backed up by research from Oishi and Kesabir. They found that different social strategies are good for different things. A broad and shallow network, lots of acquaintances, is really useful for people who face instability or move around a lot. But a narrow and deep network of just a few trusted friends is a much better strategy for people who want stability, depth, and who are more emotionally self-reliant. Highly intelligent people often intuitively go for this narrow and deep strategy. I really want you to let this quote from the book The Untangled Self just sink in for a moment, because it is such a powerful validation of this whole experience. The need for space, the slow fade from a friendship that just isn't working, it's not a personal attack, it's a biological imperative. Think about the slow fade, or even just canceling social plans. It's not a malicious act. It's a biological boundary. It's your nervous system's way of enforcing a critical energy conservation protocol. When you're in a state of cognitive and emotional debt from being on too much, withdrawal is the only way to get back to zero. It's a defense mechanism, not an attack. So, here's the most important takeaway from all of this. You don't hate people. You have a high-fidelity nervous system. It's a complex, perceptive internal system that just happens to require a massive amount of bandwidth to operate. This completely reframes the narrative, away from I'm bad at socializing to I have a complex neurological system. So in the end, it all comes down to a strategic and necessary choice. By being selective with your social energy, you are trading the quantity of your connections for the quality of them. This isn't antisocial, it's pro-purpose. It's about preserving your finite, precious energy for the people and the projects that truly matter to you.